Good evening, everyone. Welcome back to this discussion on audit. So in the previous session, we started discussing about various aspects in relation to different types of entities when it comes to their audit. Okay. So today we plan to continue on that. There are a lot of entities we talked about in our previous session that we are going to cover. Specifically, our discussion in the previous session was focused upon the government audit. Okay. And still there is some part of government audit which is pending to be completed. So we'll just continue on that part and then we'll move further on to some more entities today. Yeah. And before we get on to that, I think it will be great to have a discussion in terms of recap as to about the government audit. Okay. Some of the things that we understood are quite different in terms of our consideration when it comes to the audit. Yeah. Okay. So now, if we talk about the context of this chapter, which we have been discussing, so we discussed that when it comes to audit, there are three things. Generally, broadly, if I talk about audit, there are broadly three things that you would be dealing with as an auditor in most of the cases. One was about the usage of accounting standards. Okay, there are various accounting standards, because when it comes to the audit of the financial statements, which we have discussed all through in all of our previous sessions, okay, that was all focused on the financial statements. So that's why till the time we don't have the clarity as around the accounting standards, or till the time as an auditor, till the time we don't ensure about the applicability of all of those accounting standards, okay, as to whether those have been applied in an appropriate manner or not, will not be able to get the comfort. That was one. Second was about the auditing standards. This is again something that we have discussed quite a lot in all of our previous sessions. Okay. Third, and which is again a very, very important aspect when it comes to the audit, and which we discussed, is being focused upon, or which is also the context of this chapter. So can you tell me what was the third part which we have been discussing all through, whether it comes to a government entity or whether that is all entities in general? Yes, over to you. So what was the third part that we talked about that we are planning to cover throughout this chapter? Yes, quickly. Any thoughts from your side on this? Quickly. So what was the third part in relation to the audit that we discussed? Because that is very, very important. Why? Because that is the context of this chapter. Quickly, anyone? Okay, Hardik says to apply the auditing standards. So that is what I have already spoken. See, auditing and accounting standards, I have already spoken about. Yeah. So you need not speak. I'm just talking about the third aspect. Yes, quickly. What do you think is the third aspect? So we discussed that. Okay. Yes, very good. So I think Ritika, Hardik, Sania, they are saying rules and regulations. And in terms of rules and regulations, we are talking about any type of rules or regulations which will apply to any type of it. Yes or no? Yeah. So that is the part which we have been focusing upon, particularly, you can say, as regards this chapter. Okay. And you will also be able to now understand as to why this chapter becomes important, or how this chapter is different from a lot of requirements around the audit that we have covered so far. Yes or no? Yeah. Very good. I can see the similar response from Kasak. Srini, very good. Now, with this context about the rules and regulations and about various features which are attached to different types of entities, what are some of the peculiar features that you see only in case of government or in case of government entities? Some of the things that we talked about. Yes, over to you. What are some of the things which you will not find in case of any other entity or in case of any other audit, which you will only find in case of government or say in case of audit of government. Quickly, yeah, over to you. What is it that you will find? Very good. So Pranav says auditor is appointed in this case by CAG. Anjali says direct and indirect taxes, of course. So that can also be one of the considerations, no doubt. Hardik says expenditure, very important pointer. Expenditure, because when it comes to the government, we discussed that in respect of government, generally, when you speak about audit, it's more of an audit of expenses. Yes or no? Because government is not generally getting any income. Of course, there are ways through which government will get the receipts. Okay, maybe in some organizations, government will be involved in the business. Maybe in a lot of cases, you'll say there are a lot of receipts through direct or indirect taxes, which is fine. But majority part when it comes to the government is what? Is nothing but the expenses. Yeah. And that's why when it comes to the audit, so what is it that you will be focusing upon or that you will be doing in most of the cases? That will be the expenditure audit. Yes or no? Yeah. Okay. Shini is asking, can you please share some of your experience of auditing in case of these companies? Yeah. So of course, see, when it comes to the government, now, please again, you need to understand the government. Now, government is not necessarily a company. When you say government, so we are also talking about the government here, which is about the union or the state government, as well as some of the companies in which government is having the control. Yeah. So now, in respect of all of them, definitely there are a lot of practical situations that we are going to discuss, but I think there are a lot of points as around the audit that we need to discuss first. Then, of course, we'll touch upon all of those points. Fine. Now, in relation to this government audit, we also discussed a very, very important role which is played by CAG. Yes or no? Remember, we discussed that CAG plays a very, very important role here. Yes or no? Yeah. Now, as regards the CAG, there are certain responsibilities as well as powers which we need to now discuss. Now, in respect of powers, what was the power in general? So, power was all about having the access to the books, to the office, or to any other information which will be required for what? For carrying out the duties. Yeah. For carrying out these duties, what do you need? Power. Correct. So we discussed how are these powers given to CAG, and of course, why are those powers given to CAG? Now, when you talk about audit of government, okay, so again, we talked about expenditure audit, which is the dominant part as far as audit of government is concerned. Correct. Now, in relation to this, or you can say in relation to audit of expenditure, you can say there are ways, or you can say there are certain components into which this government audit can be divided. And we briefly touched upon those components. Audit against rules and orders, audit of sanctions, audit against provision of funds, propriety audit, performance audit. But we didn't discuss all of these. Yes or no? We only discussed one audit, that was about audit against rules and orders. So what was that? It was all about ensuring on the part of the auditor, yeah, whether expenditure conforms to relevant provisions, means whether the expenditure incurred is in line with the policies and procedures, rules. Okay, all of those aspects, whether those have been taken care of by the relevant authority or relevant entity or not, or relevant government or correct. Yeah. So this was one of the part that we talked about. Now we also need to look at other aspects in relation to this expenditure audit. So we are now coming back to this expenditure audit. Okay. Yeah. So please remember that we are currently discussing expenditure audit, and where is this expenditure audit being performed? So we are talking about expenditure audit of government. Okay. Yeah. So now in relation to expenditure audit, one of the component was rules, orders to be looked at. Now let's look at some of the other components which are important for the expenditure audit to be performed, to be carried out, right? Okay, now moving further. Again, what I'll do is I'll just move on to that document our study material. Audit of sanctions. Now in this case, what is the role of the auditor, or what is it that the auditor will do? Ensure that each item of expenditure is covered by a sanction. Okay. Now let's try to understand the meaning of sanction, because you may be thinking that what is the meaning of sanction? Okay. And how is it different from rules and orders? Okay. Now, of course, Srini is asking, sir, government includes government companies and other related parties. I would say government includes government companies, no doubt. But what is the meaning of other related parties? That I'm not clear of in terms of your question. Okay. Currently, we are talking about the government. Okay. So the government means the union, state government. Okay. That is the government that is being discussed. But as of now, we are not talking about the government companies particularly. Okay. That part is something we are going to discuss later. Okay. Yeah. Now, generally, when it comes to a government office, I'm not sure whether you have dealt with any government department or not. Each and every activity, each and every process in case of government is quite structured. Okay. Yeah. So government is quite diligent. Now you may be thinking, sir, is it true? Yes. Yeah. So very diligently, each and every activity is carried out. So in case of a government, you will not see that an activity is being performed without the approval of any other approving authority. That is not possible. Yeah, generally, what do you get to see? That this file is being prepared. Okay, so this file will go through a lot of stages. Okay, through various approving authorities. Only when the file is cleared, that is when the fund will be processed. That is when the activity will be moved forward. Do you get to see this or not? Yeah, maybe in terms of your day-to-day dealing with the government department, you may have come across this situation. Maybe you might have seen this. Yes or no? Yeah. Hardik says yes, it happens. Now, that sanction is something which is a feature of a government organization in almost all of the cases. So that's why whenever any expenditure will be incurred, will it be possible to be for that expenditure to be incurred without the sanction? Answer is no. Answer is no. At the same time, it is important for the auditor to not only check whether that particular expenditure is sanctioned or not. It is also important to check whether that has been sanctioned by the appropriate authority or not, means appropriate person or not. So let's suppose Mr. A was the person who could sanction this, but let's suppose it's been sanctioned by Mr. B and say it's a fraudulent sanction. Yeah. So as an auditor, you go and check that. That is what you mean by sanctions, or you can say looking into that aspect of sanctions. Understood? Third, audit against provision of funds, which aims at ascertaining that the expenditure has been incurred on the purpose for which grant and appropriation has been provided. Now, this is again a very peculiar feature in case of a government organization. Every time a fund is allocated to a particular authority, so what will you have? A purpose will be defined. A purpose will always be attached to that. Okay. So it will not happen that the funds have been allocated without any purpose. That doesn't happen in case of government. Not possible. Huh? Not possible. Yeah. So that's why whenever we check the expenditure, we also need to check the relevant provision of funds against those expenses, whether that was there or not, or to, in other words, to check whether the fund has been used for the purposes for which it was allocated or not. Yes or no? Yeah. Now, all of these are what? All of these are nothing. All of these are nothing, but in a way, some of the features. Yeah. Ch9 is asking, sir, sanctions is to be seen along with the provision of funds. See, all of these things, even though we are discussing in parts, when I'm saying rules and orders, sanctions, okay, provision of funds, or maybe various other points that we are going to cover. Yeah. So we are discussing this on a part by part basis, but let's suppose if you are the auditor, or let's suppose if you are the person who is verifying that, who is checking that. So of course, when you will go through a particular document, or let's suppose if you go through a particular file, so you'll look into all of those elements simultaneously. So that's how audit will be performed. Yes or no? Yeah. So it will not happen that you will have a checklist of sanctions. You'll take that first. Then maybe next day you will again pick up that file. You'll take that provision of funds first. No, that doesn't happen. Huh? So you'll pick up a file. You'll make sure that this file is all right in respect of all the requirements which should have been there. Yeah, clear? Okay. Now, moving further, propriety audit. Now, this propriety audit is something which is very, very important as far as government audit is concerned. And you can say this is something which is generally found to be there in case of government audit, though there are some elements of propriety audit which are also present in case of companies. Okay, so if you differentiate it from government, so what do you look at? You look at maybe the private companies, maybe the companies which are other than government. So do we have any propriety audit there? Not really. But some of the elements of propriety audit you will find. Okay, now, first of all, it's important to understand what is the meaning of propriety audit. Okay, and how is it different from any regular audit? Okay, so let's try to understand that. Say, for example, government authority has passed fund for construction of a building. Okay, let's suppose a building is to be constructed for which funds have been approved. Correct? Let's suppose for the construction of this building, funds amounting to 20 crores have been approved. Yeah. So now, in respect of audit, can you tell me some of the points that will come to your mind to audit this expenditure of 20 crore? Over to you. So if let's suppose you happen to be the auditor, what are the things you will go and check as far as this 20 crore of expenditure? Quickly. I'm not talking about propriety audit. So don't worry. Huh? Kasak is saying existence. Okay. So you're saying you'll go and physically verify the building. Fine. Pranav says whether the expenditure pertains to the period. Okay, great. Shini says we'll go and check supporting documents, invoices, vouchers. Very good. Hardik is again saying we'll check the supporting documents like agreements. Of course, correct. Yeah. So you're saying one, you'll do physical verification. Makes sense. Second, you are saying you will check the invoices. Okay. Vouchers, agreements. Anything else that you'll do quickly? Okay. Ritika says we'll obtain the external confirmations. All right. Very good. Hardik says we'll make inquiries. Fine. Dilip says checking the documents of title. All right. That is again good. You can do that. We can also say there are various items of expenses you will check. Yeah. Various items like cement, steel, yeah, etc. All of these things you'll check. You'll also check the measurement. You'll also check the budget. What has been the actual expenditure against the budget. You will also check the sanctions. Okay. You will also check the quotations, whether the quotations were obtained or not. Yes or no? You'll also check the provision of funds, whether 20 crore was allocated for the building or only 15 crore was allocated for the building. Correct? Yeah. Now, if you perform all of these procedures that we have just discussed, yeah, yeah. So some of these procedures that we have just discussed, when you perform that, by performance of these procedures, what will you get to see? Whether the expenditure on the building is appropriate or not. Yes or no? Yes or no? Tell me. If you perform some of these procedures, so by performance of those procedures, you'll get to know whether this expenditure is appropriate or not. Or of course, there are a lot of assertions. Okay, I'm not limited to one assertion. All the assertions you'll go check. Correct? This is what you call as a term is also assigned to this regularity audit. Okay. You can say that all of those auditing aspects that you generally look at, that you have discussed quite significantly, quite extensively in a lot of previous sessions, were around what? Were around this aspect of regularity audit. Means regularly you will do this type of audit. Correct? But there is one more aspect to this audit. Let's try to understand. Say the expenditure incurred on this building of 20 crore is absolutely fine. Let's suppose if you are the auditor, you go and check and you find that each and every penny which has been spent on construction of building of 20 crore, okay, there is absolutely no problem in that. In terms of sections, in terms of approvals, in terms of rules and regulations, in terms of accounting requirements as well. Yeah. So each and everything is perfectly all right. Now, when it comes to the government, At times, you will go beyond this. What do you mean by that? When it comes to the government audit, sometimes you may also be required to check that this building, even though has been constructed in an appropriate manner, but whether this expenditure is really justified. So, what does it mean? Means, say, this expenditure was approved, let's suppose sometime in 2020-21. Okay. Yeah. Okay. And this building was expected to be completed, say, by 2021-22. Fine. But since this date, or since the time the building has been constructed, let's suppose today we are on 31st of December 2024. What do you find? That this building is not been put to use. Or maybe only one floor of the building is put to use. Let's suppose this building has got 10 floors. 9 floors are vacant. Okay. Now, in this case, you may say, what is the problem then? The problem is that the money which has been spent, whether that was spent appropriately or not in terms of various aspects of the amount, that is all right. But in terms of requirement, means whether this money was really required to be spent on the building which has been done. Yeah. So whether that assessment was done by the authority, by the government entity, by the government, because if that was not done and unnecessarily an amount of 20 crore has been spent on the construction of the building which was not really required, then what do you call it as? That is nothing but a wastage of money. That is nothing but a wastage of money. Yeah. So you may say that, is that the work of the auditor? The answer is yes. But don't think that, sir, all this while we were not thinking about this point. This aspect is what you call as propriety audit. Okay? Which you find in case of government, which is not there in case of commercial organizations, or you can say private organizations. Why? Because in that case, if let's suppose there's a private company and that company is constructing a building and they are not using it for 5 years, does it really matter? No. Why? Because that is not the public money, that is not the public expenditure. Okay. So as far as wastage is concerned, that's the private money. Okay. So therein, you don't look into this aspect. But when it comes to the government, this is also one of the area which is required to be looked at. Not always, but again, depending on the scope which is assigned to the auditor. Yeah. So this is what you call as propriety audit, wherein you are going beyond regularity audit. Why? Because that is not considered to be sufficient at times. In which case, the auditors will have to look at cases of improper, avoidable, or ineffective, inefficient expenditure. Even if that expenditure has been incurred in conformity with existing rules and regulations. Means, as far as regularity audit is concerned, that expenditure is meeting all the criterias. But as far as propriety audit is concerned, expenditure is not meeting those criterias. Understood? How is this different? How is this propriety audit different from the regularity audit? Yeah, everyone clear on this? Yeah. So this is something which you also find as one of the features, as something in case of propriety audit. Now, audit against propriety seeks to ensure that expenditure conforms to certain principles. What are that? Expenditure should not be prima facie more than occasion demands. Every public officer is expected to exercise same vigilance in respect of expenditure incurred from public money as a person of ordinary prudence would exercise in respect of expenditure of his own money. Means if you were to spend your money, okay, you will use it in a very appropriate manner. Yeah, so there should not be any wastage. No authority should exercise its powers of sanctioning expenditure, yeah, which will be directly or indirectly to its own advantage. Public money should not be utilized for the benefit of a particular person or a section of community. Yes or no? It should be for public welfare at large. Yeah. Okay. Clear? Any questions on this? Preeti is asking, sir, regularity audit in terms of only government entities or all the entities? See, this is something you will find in case of government or the government entities. In case of private sector, you will not find this until unless this is specifically required by maybe a private company. But generally, you will not find this. Okay. Sainath is asking, sir, for this, any special skill set is required? See, I won't say any skill set is specifically required for this. It's all about being vigilant. It's all about evaluating that expenditure in terms of its usage. And to put it in a very simple terms, you can say that if you were to spend that amount for your own purposes, would you have spent that same amount or could have been cut down? If you could say that instead of spending 10 crore, I could have spent only 8 crore and I would have been able to construct the building. Okay, so that is the thought process you need to consider. Okay, but of course, some skill set is all about application of all of those principles and awareness of all of those principles. Okay, yeah. Shini is asking, what is audit code? I couldn't understand. Where are you picking this from? Audit code. Okay, now moving further. Performance audit. Now, in terms of performance audit, let's try to understand as to what is required to be looked at. Now, this is again something which you will find in case of government entities. Though, of course, this performance audit, I'm not sure whether you have gone through internal audit or not. In case of internal audit, you will find. Yeah. So what do you mean by this? You can just simply say that in respect of a particular process or a particular activity for an organization, three things you will check or three aspects you will check. Manoj, I'll come to your query. One, that is about efficiency. Second, that is about economy. And third is about effectiveness. So what do you mean by this? By efficiency, you can say the auditor will look into whether various schemes or projects are executed and their operations are conducted economically, and whether they are yielding the results which are expected of them. Means whether it was done in an efficient manner or not. Economy. Economy means to ensure whether the government has acquired the required resources in an economical manner. Means you can say, for example, if let's suppose a contract is to be executed, you go ask for quotations. Maybe one vendor is quoting 100 crore, second vendor is quoting, third vendor is only quoting 30 crore. So which one is more economical? Of course, 30 crore. Yeah. So one of the aspects to be checked will be whether that is economical or not. Okay. Third, effectiveness. Now, by effectiveness, what do you mean to say? You can say it's all about checking the quality. Yeah. And now please remember, when it comes to performance audit, so there are 3 E's we are required to check. And the combination of 3 E's should be such, which is the most appropriate one. For example, there are 3 vendors. One is quoting 100 crore, second is quoting 80 crore, third is quoting only 30 crore. Now, which one out of these 3 you will say is the most economical? Tell me. Which one out of these 3 you will say is the most economical? Over to you quickly. Out of these 3, which one is the most economical? Dilip says 30 crore. What about others? Anjali says 30 crore. I think this is quite simple. Yeah. But what if the effectiveness, the efficiency becomes a problem if you award that contract to that vendor of 30 crore? So will that fulfill the criteria? Tell me. The answer is no. The answer is no. So that's why it's not that the government or the relevant party should only choose the most economical. It should be a mixture of these 3. It should be a mixture of these 3 through which the best allocation is chosen. Understood? Yeah. So maybe the best allocation you will get through that vendor of 80 crore. Yeah. Okay. So it's not only about choosing the cheapest one in a way, right? So when it comes to the performance audit, so these 3 E's are what the auditor will always focus upon. Okay, in relation to any of the processes which are involved in that entity or in that organization. Understood? Clear on this? Yeah. So now, whenever it comes to the expenditure audit, and if you are asked about components, so please remember there are 5 components of expenditure audit. What are those? Rules and orders, sanctions, provision of funds, propriety, and performance. Understood? Yeah. Clear? Any questions? I think Manoj had a question. Manoj is asking, sir, this process is so long in government companies, and in 1 year time period, auditor is going to change. So responsibilities keep on changing. No, Manoj. So it's not only about the audit of the financial statements. Please understand. See, for performance of these types of audits, one, appropriate time frame is given. It's not necessary that only one auditor will be involved. Of course, there are a lot of auditors who will be involved in this. Yeah. And please also understand that we are not currently talking about the audit of financial statements here. We are talking about audit of expenditure. for which some of these aspects are required to be looked at. So that's how it is, it's done. And 1 year is a good time period for any auditor to come and check. So auditor is not going to check each and everything. Yeah, so it's not so typical again. Okay. Malu is asking, sir, can you please explain once again propriety audit in C? See, propriety audit is all about ensuring one principle. In very simple terms, if you have to understand. What is that? Whether the expenditure was improper, avoidable, or ineffective. Okay. Yeah. If you say yes, then such an expenditure you will say is not meeting the propriety criteria. That is what you mean by propriety. Means whether that was really justified or not. Yeah. Okay. Clear on this? So Manu seems to be now clear. All right. So now moving further. Next aspect about the audit. Okay. Still we are talking about the government era. Is about the audit of receipts. Now, as we discussed, government may have receipts from taxes generally, or there could be some loans which the government may obtain, or some grants. Yeah. Now, when it comes to the checking of such receipts, what are the steps? What are the procedures which an auditor will perform? Whether all such revenues means receipts, most likely, yeah, or the debts have been correctly assessed, realized, or credited to the government account by the designated authority, means whether there has been. Okay, so when you go receive that, let's suppose if the government borrows some money, yeah, so the authority which has given that loan to the government, so whether that is credited to the account of government, okay, as around that arrangement, what were the underlying documents, whether adequate regulations and procedures have been framed by the department agency in respect of what? Assessment, collection, proper allocation of cases, whether such regulations and procedures are actually being carried out. Okay. See, when it comes to the funds which the government will obtain, again, what will happen? Those funds are going to be allocated somewhere. Yeah. So all of those funds are generally marked that this fund is going to be utilized against this fund is going to be utilized against this. Yeah. So whether all of those procedures have been performed or not. At times, investigation of irregularities, double refunds, fraudulent or forged refund voucher. Yeah. All of those aspects are also required to be looked at. Why? Because when it comes to the processing of funds, some of these types of transactions may also take place. Yeah. As regards the government, what are the systems and procedures which are in place? So, of course, if the government will receive funds, whether through taxes or any other thing, government will also have some systems, procedures, policies, rules and regulations, whether those are in place or not. If those are in place, so what are those procedures? Okay, so it's all about, again, looking into the rules and orders which are in relation to the receipts. Okay. Then, in respect of the quantum or the extent of audit which is required to be done, under each category of audit. Now, who will determine this? This will be determined by CAG. So everywhere CAG is somebody who will define the scope, who will define the extent of checking. Why? Because it's all something which CAG has to look at, because eventually they have to take care of all of these aspects. Understood? Yeah. Now, when it comes to the government departments, some of the stores and inventories which the government may have acquired through the funds which are allocated to the government. Now, that is also required to be checked, or you can say examined, audited. Yeah. So, what do you do for that as an auditor? Again, this is something which CAG will be looking into. Means CAG will get this audit carried out. CAG will get this audit performed through the auditor. But how is this audit conducted? This audit is conducted to ascertain whether the regulations regarding the purchase, receipt, issue, custody, sale, and the stock take, means physical verification of inventory, those are well devised and properly carried out or not. Okay, so means in respect of any other inventory, some of the things that you would have done as an auditor, the same thing you will apply here. Correct? In case there are any deficiencies in the quantities, whether that has been brought to the attention of the relevant authority, yeah, maybe there could be some deficiencies in the internal control system, whether that has been brought to the notice of the relevant authority, means the relevant department, the relevant government authority. Okay. When it comes to the purchases, so whether those purchases were properly sanctioned, quotations were obtained against that or not. Most economical means quotation should be obtained. Yeah. To ensure that the prices paid are reasonable, means, of course, the quotations were obtained, but it should also be looked at that whatever was agreed for, whether the same prices are paid or something excess has been paid, whether that is in agreement with what was agreed with the vendors or not, whether the material which was received or the quantity of inventory which was received, stores which were received, whether those were inspected, whether those were physically verified, whether the same quantity which has been purchased, which has been mentioned on the invoice, is physically received or not. Yeah. So in respect of inventory and stores, you'll find that almost all the procedures which you'll do in respect of any other organization, you'll also do here. Yes or no? So these are quite similar. Why? Because the end procedure as around some of these types of activities and processes will not change. Yeah, they will generally be same. Okay. Hardik is saying condition and existence. Yes, of course. See, existence when it comes to the inventory is the most important point. And that's why you have this stock take. Shrini is asking, sir, why in point 6 it mentions neither negotiable nor questioned. So where are you picking this point 6 from? Where are you reading this point neither negotiable nor questioned? So is it on the government audit? Is it? Okay, so I'm not sure where are you picking this point 6 from. Again, I'm not sure on where is this point 6. Audit of receipts. So what are you reading here? Neither negotiable nor questioned. Let me just quickly read this for you. I'll have to read this first. Prescribed quantity and quantum are structured in accordance with the design, etc. Okay, institute provides planning, executing, reporting is monitored. These are built-in arrangements with the CAG to ensure that work assigned is carried out as prescribed. So where do you read this? Okay, so this one, second sentence. Okay, extent and quantum of audit required to be done under each category of audit are determined by CAG. So these are neither negotiable nor questioned, means whatever scope CAG will define. So that is something which will be performed by the auditor. Means CAG will decide that this is what you need to do. Yeah. On which a question cannot be raised. Why? Because CAG is the authority. So that's the point. Okay. There's nothing specific on that part. Understood? Now, moving further. So when it comes to the public enterprises, okay, so now we are talking about some of the public enterprises who are required to maintain commercial accounts. Now, how do you define them? So there are certain categories of public enterprises. Public enterprises means again the enterprises which are under the control of the government. One, we can say there are departmental enterprises. For example, railways, post and telegraph, you can say. Then you can say AIR, Doordarshan. Yeah, so these are all what? Departmental enterprises. Then you can have statutory bodies or corporations. Okay. No, Srini, that's not the point. I'll come to that. Now, when it comes to the statutory bodies or corporations, now some of the examples for the statutory bodies or corporations could be, you can say SBI, RBI, CBI, Bureau of Indian Standards, okay, NGT. Yeah, of course, all of these government entities only. Third is about the companies which have been set up under the Companies Act, but which are under the control of government. Means which have been registered as a company, but they are under the control of government. Yeah, wherein you can bring in a lot of PSUs. PSUs like HPCL, IOCL, BPCL. Yeah, there's so many PSUs. You can just bring them. Okay. Now, when it comes to audit of the departmental enterprises, they are undertaken in the same manner as any other department of government. Something that we have talked about. Means wherein you'll go check receipts, expenditures. When it comes to statutory bodies or corporation, that depends on the nature and type of the statute which they are looking into. Now there again, their accounts, their audit is conducted by whom? CAG. Yeah. So there again, the ultimate party which is responsible for all of this happens to be CAG only. Correct. Third, and I would say the most relevant for us, happens to be this government companies. Okay. Now, in respect of government companies, now please understand, for the audit of companies, there are a lot of procedures you have looked at in your previous sessions. I'm talking about planning till execution, till conclusion, till reporting. Okay. All of those you discussed are the audit procedures which will be performed in respect of companies. But over here, we are talking about those companies which are within the control of government. Now, there are some features, or you can say there are some regulations which are attached to the government companies. Now, let's try to understand what this, and this is very, very important. Okay, you can say this is an important part. And at times, you can also see some of the questions as around this part. Yeah, because this is something you very, very commonly get to see. Yeah. Now, when it comes to the government company, In case of a government company, what will you find? You will find that CAG is the one which shall appoint the auditor. Means auditor is appointed by whom? CAG. Okay. Whether it's the first auditor or the subsequent auditor. First auditor means if it's a newly incorporated company. And the auditor who is appointed shall submit a copy of the audit report to CAG. Now you may be thinking, sir, the audit report is issued to the members of the company. So is it any different in case of government company? No. Here again, because it's a company, so that's why the report will be addressed to the members of the company. We are talking about a copy of that audit report in terms of its submission to CAG. Means the auditor has this responsibility to submit a copy of that report to CAG also. Okay. Now, if you remember, we just looked at one point wherein we discussed that what is going to be the scope of the auditor. That is what CAG will decide in respect of government organization, right? And therein, I think one of you, Shini, asked me, sir, in that case, don't you think that auditor is compromising on his objectivity? So let's try to understand this. And I think again, a question is there from Ritika. Sir, is it different from what you see in case of private companies? No. Okay, so let's try to understand this. Everything which the auditor is supposed to do in relation to his independence, yeah, or whether you talk about all of those aspects, independence, integrity, objectivity, all of those things are not being impacted due to this. So let's try to understand as to how does this really work. So say there is a PSU. Okay. Yeah. Let's suppose this is XYZ Limited. Fine. Now, when it comes to its audit, so what will happen? Auditor will come and audit the financial statements of this company. Correct? So in this case, when the financial statements will be audited, so what is it that the auditor will do? Auditor will apply all of those auditing standards that we have discussed. Understood? In terms of the application of auditing standards, nothing is going to change. Right? But what may happen is when this audit will be completed. So let's suppose this audit is completed. Let's suppose audit of financial statements is done. So a copy of the audit report goes to CAG. Yeah. So sometimes what the CAG may require is CAG may require that when you will audit these financial statements, there are certain areas that you need to focus upon. You can say something in addition to what the scope of audit of financial statements would include. CAG may add something to that. In this case. Okay. So that is one way through which CAG may increase the scope. So everything which the auditor would have performed as far as audit of financial statements, nothing has been cut down. Only some of the things which CAG may require has been added to that. At what stage? When the audit is being performed. Or what may also happen is, once this audit report is submitted, yeah, once this audit report is submitted, at that point of time, CAG may think that during the audit, there are few areas or there are few points with which CAG is not comfortable. So CAG may require the auditor to look into those aspects. Okay. So now, generally, when this audit report is issued, a discussion is also done with the relevant persons who are involved. Okay. Now that's how it's practically should be done. Okay. Or what is practically required to be done. But in most of the cases, what you find is that this audit report is completed. This is all done and dusted. And that's when some of the comments from CAG may come. Okay. But by that time, audit is completed. So nothing can't be changed. So any other thing which the CAG may require will have to be looked into later on. Yeah, because if the audit is performed, everything is signed, done and dusted, then you can't do anything. Maybe when it is at the draft level, at point of time, if something additional has up only for the next period. Yes or no? So that's the practical aspect I'm telling you. Understood? Now, through this, I think you would have understood that as far as the performance of audit procedures is concerned, there's nothing which is impacted in terms of the objectivity. Understood? Yeah. And how is it slightly different from what you see in case of private companies? And now we'll try to go through this part through which you should get more clarity. Yeah. Hoping Shini, Ritika, you will get more clarity with this. Okay. So now, what does it say? Auditors shall submit a copy of audit report to CAG, which among other things include the directions, if any. Now, please remember, if any means it's not necessary that they will include the directions always. Okay. The action taken thereon and its impact on the accounts and financial statements of the company. Okay. So if the CAG believes it's required, they will do this. Plus, CAG shall within 16 days from the receipt of the audit report have a right to. Now, what is this right which is available? So now when the auditor will give the audit report to CAG, so within 60 days, CAG may require auditor to conduct a supplementary audit. Supplementary means in addition to what has been already done, perform something in addition to that. Yeah. And for the purpose of such supplementary audit, require information, additional information to be furnished to any person. And CAG may comment upon or supplement such audit report. Means CAG will provide its comment on that. Audit. Okay. So these two things are required to be done by the auditor. In addition to this, okay. So now law says, so this requirement is again coming from the Companies Act. What does it say? Without prejudice to the provisions relating to the audit and auditor, CAG may, in case of a company, if he considers necessary by an order, cause test audit to be conducted of the accounts of such company. Okay. Yeah. Now, what is this test audit? You can say this is in addition to what the audit of financial statements has been done. Yeah. Clear on this? Clear? Any questions? Clear? Shini is asking, sir, what is the timeline in which auditor needs to submit the report to CAG? See, whenever the audit is ready, auditor is ready, so auditor will give the report to the CAG. So that's how it works. Okay. Or you can say whenever the auditor is done. So that's when auditor will give the report to the CAG. Sana is asking, what is it that will be included in the test audit? See, when it comes to the test audit, that will be on the discretion of the CAG. So what do they require as far as examination of accounts? So of course, the scope is around what? Test audit to be conducted of the accounts. So in relation to the accounts of the company, if they believe some specific areas are required to be examined, so that is what they will decide. So they will look into it accordingly. Yeah, it's not specified that only this is something they can do. Hardik is asking, sir, always auditor has to tell the impact of transactions that are undertaken by the company in case of government company. So what do you mean by impact of transaction? Auditor will do the work the way it's required to be done. Tambeshwari is asking, sir, what is the difference? See, the difference is when it comes to the supplementary audit. So that's a top up. That's a top up. So an audit is going on, and so you can say something in addition to that, he has been asked to do that. But tax audit, you can say, is something which is all over again in relation to the accounts of the company, wherein you are not just simply moving further from that. You are just doing that all over again. Yeah. Clear? Now, this is something which you very, very commonly read as far as requirements of audit are concerned in relation to PSUs. Okay. Yeah. Hardik is asking, like, sir, any transaction undertaken by the company, like in, was it beneficial? No. See, that is about propriety audit. So whether that is required to be done or not, that is something which will be defined in the scope, which CAG will decide. But that is in respect of expenditure audit. Now, in respect of PSUs, government companies, we are talking about audit of financial statements. So if the statutory auditor, so you can say we are talking about the scope of the statutory auditor. So if you appoint the statutory auditor, what is it that statutory auditor will do in respect of government company? So that is the scope of statutory auditor in respect of government company. Okay. Yes, Shrini. Yes, of course. If the CAG decides, that can be done. Pallavi is saying, if the supplementary audit is conducted, is this supplementary audit conducted when the CAG is not satisfied with the audit report? Yes, of course. See, a lot of situations are possible. Let's try to understand it in this way. Maybe there are some areas of concern which were there in the past years. And let's suppose the auditor is new. But CAG believes that the auditor has not been able to appropriately look into those areas. So that's where CAG may require some of these things. Or maybe in relation to that particular organization, there is some news. Okay, there is some concern. Yeah. So that is where CAG will ask the auditor to focus more on that. Yeah. So it could be triggered by various reasons. Huh? Okay. Or maybe everything has been performed in an appropriate manner by the auditor, but the opinion of CAG is different in respect of certain matters, because the difference of opinion could be there or not. Yes or no? Yeah. So now let's talk about it practically. So how the things really work. Okay. So practically what you get to see is that generally when this sort of comments are given by CAG, that happens subsequent to the submission of the final audit report. Or you can say that their comments are received generally quite late. By that time, everything is finalized. Okay. But that doesn't go well as far as auditor is concerned or the audit is concerned. Why? Because a question mark has been raised in terms of what they have finalized. Yeah, so that's why generally an effort is made by both the company as well as the auditor to discuss, to ensure that whatever they are reporting upon is in line with uh, the opinion of the CAG as well. But sometimes they may discuss that this is an area of concern for which the CAG may decide, okay, that in the next quarter or maybe in the next financial year, auditor needs to take care of that. But generally, in case of PSUs, you find this to be more of listed. So that's why it goes on a period by period basis. Okay, generally it's on a quarterly basis. So that's how things practically work. Understood? Yeah, clear. Any questions? Any doubts so far? Any questions? Any doubts? Yeah, so these are some of the practical things. Now, if you talk about government companies, so practically in case of government companies, what will you get to see? You'll get to see that it's more about an audit of expenditure. So, what is going to be the focus area for the auditor? In most of the cases, it will be all about expenditure. Because if let's suppose you are talking about, say, a statutory body, okay, or maybe a departmental concern, or maybe any government authority. So where do they get from? Let's suppose central government has allocated 1000 crore. Now that is where the fund is coming. Simple. Now how is this 1000 crore being spent? As around that, whether policies, procedures, rules, regulations, propriety, all of those aspects have been looked at by the relevant authority, relevant entity or not when they spend that amount. So all of those areas are the focus areas, you can say, for the auditor. Or you can say it's more about an audit of expenses particularly. But when it comes to a government company which are involved in business, okay, something which we talk about in case of PSUs, therein it's a full blown audit. Full blown audit means it's an audit of financial statements wherein you'll go apply accounting standards, you'll check, sorry, you'll go apply auditing standards, you'll go check application of accounting standards by the entity, by the organization, and of course rules and regulations which are applicable to them, policies and procedures, and if there are any scoping areas which the CAG has required to be looked into. And of course, in this case, as far as auditor is concerned, auditor is now not only discussing all of these points with the management. Along with the management, there is also one party which is attached in the audit. Yeah. So when it comes to the government audit, so it's all about three parties who are involved in the audit process. One, the organization, of course. Second, the auditor, and third is CAG. Yeah. So you can say collectively it's done. So that's how it's practically done in almost every government organization that you get to see. Okay. Clear on this? Any questions, doubts? If you have, please let me know. Over to you. Any questions, any doubts if you have? Quickly, huh? Everyone, quickly. Any questions, any doubts? No? All right. So then I think what we can do is, I think we have one, this question based on this government setup. Yeah. So let's try to look into that question. Okay. Yeah. So let's try to look into this question now. Yeah. And you need to answer this, huh? So now it is the duty of CAG to audit and report on all expenditure from Consolidated Fund of India. Remember Consolidated Fund of India? and of each state and of each union territory having a legislative assembly, and to ascertain whether the monies shown in the accounts as having been disbursed were legally available for and applicable to the service or the purpose to which they have been applied or charged, and whether the expenditure conforms to the authority which governs it. In this context, you are required to explain what do you understand by Consolidated Fund of India and its importance. Over to you. Yeah, over to you. Quickly. In the previous session, if you remember, we talked about it. Yes or no? Yeah. So we are discussing that now. And please remember, some of these type of questions you should also expect. Okay. Yeah. Quickly, over to you. I have picked up this question from the study material only. Yeah. Quickly. Quickly. Any thoughts from your side? So if you remember about Consolidated Fund of India, what is that? Its importance. Great. I think this response comes from Sukhveer. Sukhveer says Consolidated Fund of India means revenues from taxes, loans borrowed, repayment of loans. I think Pallavi has the same answer. Tambeshri's okay. So very good. So I can see a lot of explanation around the Consolidated Fund of India. Shini, Sainath, great. Sania, Pallavi, Ritika. Now, tell me what is the importance? So that is one part, wherein you are just trying to explain as to what do you understand by this fund. Now, what is the importance? So there are a couple of things which are attached in this question. So what is the importance? Over to you quickly. What is the importance? Tell me quickly, huh? What is the importance of this? Quickly, what is the importance? So let's try to understand this. Okay. Consolidated Fund of India consists of all the revenue which is received from taxes, whether those are direct or indirect. All the loans which are taken by Government of India. All the amount of repayment of loan. Yes or no? Yeah. So we are talking about the fund which is consolidated in a very, very simple terms or a layman language. You can say all the funds which are received, they are getting consolidated. Yeah. So that's how you can just try to memorize this. Understood? Now, what are going to be the sources of funds? So these are all sources and you are consolidating this. Now comes the point around its importance, because in the question, there are two things which are being asked. So in the exam, you need to answer both. Only then you will get full marks. Yes or no? Now, its importance lies in the fact that government expenditure is incurred from this fund. Obviously, yes or no? So what is the importance of this fund? See, if this fund will not be available, how will the government spend any amount? Yes or no? Very, very simple. Correct? No monies out of this fund shall be appropriated, means allocated, except in accordance with law and for the purposes and in the manner which is provided in the constitution. Yeah. So if any money is required to be spent anywhere, if any expenditure is required to be made in respect of any activity, in respect of any transaction, so how should that be done? That should be in accordance with the rules, orders, procedures. Now for the government, how will you look into that? Where do you get this from? That's the Constitution of India. Yes or no? Yeah. Because we are not talking about a company. A company can create its policies, its rules. We are talking about the government. For the government, everything is defined. Yes or no? Clear? Yeah. So you can see that some of these types of questions could be there in the exam. Yes or no? Yeah. So this situation comes from nowhere. And if you look at the simple question, the question is very, very simply about the Consolidated Fund of India. So what they have tried to do is they have just tried to, sort of build this in the form of a case scenario. And that's how this question has been asked to you. Okay. Yeah. Clear? Everyone clear on this? Any questions, any doubts if you have? Tell me quickly. Any questions, any doubts? Then I think we can take a break. Okay. And after the break, we'll move on to the next type of entity, that is about local bodies. All right. So I can see this query coming from Tambeshwari. She's asking, sir, government expenditure adjusting again this fund. Uh, Government expenditure adjusting. Yes. So the government expenditure is made out of this fund. Yeah. Shini is asking, sir, can we add the provisions for these expenses also? Provisions for these expenses also mentioned here. What provisions you are talking about in respect of consolidated fund? So what provisions you'll add? I couldn't understand. So some of the provisions, if you can just let me know. I understand you are talking about the solution, huh? That in the solution should we add this provision for expenditure? Yes, of course. That's one and the same thing. Yeah, of course. Because out of the funds, where is that going to be allocated? So that is again the importance. See, eventually, everything that will be spent from the funds only. So at one place, you have sources and then application of funds. So from the sources, you will accumulate somewhere, and from that accumulated fund, you will utilize that. So that's the importance. Yeah. So if you don't have this fund, you will not be able to spend. As simple as that. Okay. So it's like a piggy bank for you. Yeah. So in a piggy bank, you will collect your money and that is what you'll spend. So if you don't have that bank available, where will you spend your money from? So that's the importance. Yeah. So that's how you can also define this. Clear? Any other questions, doubts if you have? Quickly. Any questions, doubts? No? All right, great. So good. So with this, I think we are done on our first part, and which is considered to be quite typical generally, okay, what we have seen. Otherwise, there are a lot of other aspects which are going to be more of generic in nature. As we will move further, you will see. Okay. But I would say this part of this chapter particularly is quite different, or you can say has a lot of peculiar features which are generally not find, which you then generally not find in case of private organizations. Okay. So from that perspective, I would say this part of the chapter becomes all the more important, right? Okay, so I think we can take a break now, and after the break, we'll continue with our discussion. Yeah. Okay, Manish, we can take a break now. All right. Hi. Welcome back. So let's continue our discussion. Okay. So now we'll move on to the next part, that is about local bodies. Okay. So now, even though we are talking about these local bodies, for example, municipality, okay, municipal corporations, these are all what? They are local bodies only. Now, in this case, you may think that entity or this is not a part of government. Yes, of course. But there are again some peculiar features which are there in case of local bodies. Okay. So in a way, we can also say that we are extending our discussion of the government audit, but at the same time, we are talking more specifically on the local bodies. All right. Yeah. I can see this query from Shini. Of course, Shini, I think we have already talked about it. Huh? So in terms of audit experiences, so if there is anything specific on the audit experience, you can just ask me. Otherwise, what do you mean by experience? So experience is all about these practical things which you get to see in case of uh, audit of government companies. Huh? Like for example, PSUs. So we talked about as to how this mechanism works in case of organization in terms of auditor as well as the CAG. Okay, so how does these comment move? How these are really impacted in terms of the organization? Okay, so this is something which you get to see. Otherwise, there can be a lot of experiences. Maybe in case of a particular organization, the revenue was an issue. Maybe there was some accounting matter which was an issue, which is quite generic. Okay, which could be there in respect of any entity and which varies from case to case. There is nothing specific from the context that we have been discussing. Context is more about the government audit. Okay, and the other practical or you can say experience could be in relation to the audit. So when it comes to any government, okay, whether you talk about any union or authority, so in those cases, what is going to be your audit? Your audit is all about expenses, or you can say checking of expenses. Checking of expenses in terms of various criteria, invoices, approval, sanctions, all of those stuff. Okay, so these are the things which you will get to see. Beyond that, there will not be anything in respect of government audit. Yeah. Okay, now talking about municipality or the local bodies. Now, what are some of the features which you will get to see in case of these local bodies? So let's try to understand that. In case of local bodies, there's a municipality, or you can say this local self-government, yeah, which will be involved in the administration of a particular locality. That could be a town, city, or a village, or maybe a smaller area. Yeah, something that you get to see in case of municipal corporation. Yeah, for example, BMC, MCD, all of these are what? Municipalities. Correct? And what are they involved in? Yeah, they are involved in a lot of activities. As far as the receipts are concerned, where do they come from? Government and through local taxes. And once again, the dominant part for these local bodies is going to be what? The expenditure. Yeah, the money which they spent. So that is the dominant part as far as their audit is concerned or as far as their activities are concerned. Now, if you talk about municipal government in India, so you can say there are 5 distinct types. One, you can say municipal corporation, municipal council, notified area committees, town area committees, cantonment committees. So this is how these are structured. Now, municipal authorities, they are involved in what? They are involved in the functioning of their particular area. Now, that functioning could be in relation to some of the regulations, maintenance, development activities. Yeah, you all understand municipality as to what all activities it does. Yeah, so that's the function. That's the activity which is assigned to them, which is allocated to them. Yes or no? Okay, now expenditure which they incur. Now, because they are dealing with a particular region, so that's why various activities in relation to that particular region. So, for example, some of the government hospitals in that particular region. So, you can say expenditure on health, dispensaries, public safety, some of the schools, which could be within the purview of these authorities. Yeah, public works department. Yeah, and of course, if there are any interest payments could be in relation to the loans which they may have borrowed. Okay, so these are going to be some of the expenses which they incur. And what are going to be the sources of their receipts or revenues? That is going to be all about taxes. Yeah, because we are talking about local taxes, so that's why octroi, or you can say property taxes. So these are the dominant part. Other than that, there could be various other taxes. For example, taxes on advertisement, vehicle taxes. Yeah, so different categories of taxes. Now that will again be dependent on the area and the municipality which is involved. Yeah. Now, these municipalities, beyond this revenue which they collect from the taxes, also receive a significant chunk of money from the government. You can say the state government or the central government. Yeah. Which is used by them for their expenditure. Now, what are these funds? You can say these are the type of grants which they receive. Now, some of those could be the general purpose grants, for which any purpose is not defined, or there could be some specific purpose grants which are given for a specific purpose, means only for that purpose you can utilize this money. Yeah, as against a general purpose grant. Or there could be a third category of grant, yeah, which are given to these bodies or these municipalities as a compensation on account of loss of any revenue on taking over a tax by a state government from the local government. So let's suppose a particular tax was earlier collected by the municipality or the local government. Yeah. So let's suppose they were receiving 50 crore or 100 crore from that source. Now let's suppose state government or the central government has moved that taxation directly to themselves. So that's why this local government or the municipality will lose out this much part. Yeah, so they are compensated for this. So that's why you can say it's a statutory or compensatory grant. So grant which is given to compensate them so that they can continue to spend the amount. Now, what is the purpose of the municipalities? Of course, to spend money for the public at large. Yes or no? So that's the purpose, correct? Now, in relation to the municipality, the important aspect arises as around the financial administration. Now, what do you mean by financial administration? Financial administration, you can say, involves three things. One, the budgetary procedure. Budgetary procedure means putting in the budgets in place. So every time, what will they have? They will have the budgets. Okay. Why do they have the budgets? Because that's how the government department usually functions. So every time they will have the budgets. Let's suppose there are 5 activities. There are 5 types of expenses on which they need to spend, say, 500 crore. So they will have the budget against each and every activity. And that's how then the actual expenditure is tracked against them. Yeah. And that's how they also plan their funds. And that's how they also plan their expenditure. Okay. Because if let's suppose they plan that they require 500 crore. Why? Because that is the expenditure they need to incur. So then they will have to plan the fund against that. Yeah. So it could be an approach wherein they are planning their expenses and then the funds against that. But generally, that's not how it's done. Generally, what will happen is they will get the fund or the allocated fund plus the other receipts, etc., which they will receive. So that's how they will decide their budget. Budget in respect of monies which they will spend. Correct? Okay. Now, this is one feature which you'll always find in case of municipalities or the local bodies. Second is about the expenditure control. Now, expenditure control is all about putting a control system in place. Okay, so it's similar to what you see in case of any other organization. If you remember that internal control system. Okay, so we are talking about similar sort of control system which should be there in place. Why? So that the expenditure of this municipality or of the local body is incurred in a manner which is required by that particular body. Yeah, so that control system to be put in place. So that is what is again a very, very common feature, peculiar feature which you get to see in case of a local body. Third aspect is about the accounting system. Now, these municipality bodies are also required to prepare their accounts. Yeah. Now, these accounting systems are not similar to what you will have in case of a company. So we are not talking about financial statements of a local body. We are just talking about the accounting system. Because if the accounting system will not be in place, so they will not be able to apply some of these requirements of the budgets as well as the controls. Yes or no? Yeah. And these systems, these accounting requirements are again important. Why? Because tomorrow, if they require any sort of report, anything to be assessed, any analysis to be done, so that is only possible when they will have all of these accounting systems in place. Yeah. So that's how they are administered in terms of their various requirements in relation to finances. So whether it is about obtaining the funds or whether it is about expenditure of those funds. Yeah. Now the question arises as to why do you need audit of local bodies and who will appoint the auditor? Now, expenditure control of this municipal expenditure is exercised by state governments through the appointment of auditors. So an auditor will be appointed. Yeah. Now, who will do that? Generally, these state governments will do that. However, if you look at some of the municipal corporations which are quite large in terms of size, okay, so they have also been given somewhat autonomy in respect of this appointment of the auditor. Yeah, so that's why if you look at Municipal Corporation of Delhi, Mumbai, and some of these large ones, they are given the powers to appoint their own auditors for regular external audit. Regular external audit means who will do the audit of these local bodies. Now the question arises, what is going to be the purpose of the audit? What are going to be the objectives of the audit? So I would say this is no different from what you find in case of any other audit. So if let's suppose if I ask you, why would an audit be required? Can you tell me quickly? Over to you. Why do you think an audit will be required? So forget about whether this is a local body or any other body or any other organization. Do you understand the requirement or the purpose or the advantages or the objectives of the audit? Yes or no? Hardik is saying true and correct view of the financial statements, but let's suppose the financial statements are not there. Okay, let's try to use more of layman language or that thought process. Very good. Kasak says transparency. Ritika says to ensure that the things are going smooth. Very good. Yeah. So that's how you can say this. Kasak says transparency. Yes. Hardik says in respect of appropriateness of books of accounts. Very good. Yeah. Nitin says fairness. Yes, of course. Yeah. And the same objectives are written over here. So what are the objectives? Reporting on the fairness of content and presentation of financial statements. Reporting upon strengths and weaknesses of systems of financial control. Yes or no? Something which you will get to see in any other audit. Reporting on adherence to legal and administrative requirements. Reporting upon whether the value is being fully received on money spent, and if there are any errors, frauds, misusage of resources, yeah, all of those aspects, whether those have been taken care of or not. So how do you get to know about it? Through audit only. I think same is the response from Amit also. Yeah. So now, as far as objectives of this audit are concerned, are these any different? The answer is no. So that's why every time you come across some of these points, don't think that these are very, very specific to a local body. No, these are quite generic. Huh? So don't you think that you will find all the same objectives, these 5 points? Huh? Don't you think you will find the same thing in case of company? Tell me quickly. Don't you think in a company you will not have the same points? Tell me quickly. Over to you. Dilip says yes. Yes or no? Tell me. Yes or no? Shini says yes. Yeah. So that's why some of these things are quite generic, which are not going to change. Plus, if you remember, we also talked about some of the aspects related to efficiency, effectiveness, economy, 3 E's, means performance audit. If you remember, we also talked about propriety aspect. Yeah. So all of those things can be looked at, can be analyzed only and only when you have audit in place. Yes or no? Correct? Yeah. So that's why these requirements are no different from what we have already discussed quite a lot. Understood? Yeah. Now, let's talk about some of the requirements in relation to audit. Now, some of these requirements that we are going to cover, you will find these are no different significantly. Yeah? Lot of things you will find to be quite generic in nature now. So one, appointment is slightly different. Okay, we discussed that local fund audit wing. So you can say it's the relevant department of the state government. Now they will be the in charge of audit of municipal accounts. However, if you look at some bigger municipal corporations like Delhi, Mumbai, etc., so they will appoint their own external auditor. Correct? Now, what are going to be the concerns of the auditor? Of course, so those are no different from the objectives. So you can say these objectives we have just looked at. Yeah. So what is it that the auditor will focus on? Objectives of the audit, and some of the objectives of the audit we just discussed. Yes or no? So is this not a repetition? Tell me. Is this not a repetition? Yes. Tell me quickly. Don't you think it's a repetition? So when you talk about auditor's concerns, so is it any different from the objectives? The answer is no. So that's how you need to now understand most of these points. Huh? So a lot of these things are going to be now similar. Now rules and regulations. Of course, we have been talking about it, that when it comes to the audit, so what is it that the auditor will have to ensure? Auditor will have to ensure that the activities of that particular organization, whether that is government, whether that is private company, whether that is PSU, or whether that's a local body, whether all of those activities, all of those processes, all of those expenses, all of those receipts, or the accounts of that organization are in compliance with the relevant laws and regulations. Yes or no? Yeah. So I would advise some of these points you can just make a note of. And every time when you will have any audit program to be prepared or audit requirements to be discussed, you can just use all of those pointers. Okay. So you can just say that this is going to be a list of pointers which you can always use and apply in respect of various types of entities. So this will help you quite a lot, because every time when we'll talk about a different type of entity, so you'll not have to think over and over again that what are going to be the points, what are going to be the requirements. So you'll always understand. Yes or no? Yeah. Authorizations. Now this again is no different, isn't it? So what do you mean by authorization? Authorization means whether that particular process, now that process could be in relation to expense, in relation to a receipt, whether that has gone through the appropriate approval process or not, means sanction, means authorization. As simple as that. Correct? Yes or no? Yeah. Shini is asking, sir, what is the meaning of bigger municipal corporation? Means which are larger in size. Okay. You can say, let's suppose there's a small city. In a small city, there will be a municipal corporation. Correct. And if you talk about a large city, so there will be a municipal corporation. So the municipal corporation which is there in a large city will always be a bigger one. Yes or no? Tell me. Tell me quickly. Shini, understood? Quickly, yeah, are you there? Shini is asking, but Delhi is a small state, right? How can you say Delhi is small? Delhi is not small. Delhi is too big. Yeah? Who says Delhi is small? Huh? So it's one of the metropolitan city. Yeah? Quite big. Okay. Understood? Yeah? All right. So now moving further. Now provisioning. Now provisioning again, we have discussed. It's no different. What do you mean by provisioning? Provisioning means to ensure that there is a provision of funds. Now, where are you picking this point from? Remember the components of expenditure audit. Components of expenditure audit. Yes or no? Remember? Remember? Yeah. So if you look at the audit requirements, in the audit requirements for local bodies, most of these points, where do they come from? From the components of expenditure audit. So if let's suppose there's a question in the exam for this audit program of local bodies, don't you think you'll be able to write 5-6 points on this just by remembering those components of expenditure audit? Tell me quickly. Yes or no? Yeah. So that's how you need to approach this every time. Understood, everyone? So I'm just trying to set up this approach, or you can say the thought process, when you will attempt some of these things, okay, in terms of your preparation to answer some of these types of questions. Clear? Yeah. So whenever some of these generic questions will be asked, which is all about audit or audit program or audit requirements or audit objectives, which is not very specific to the rules and regulations, because see, rules and regulation is something you'll have to memorize, but all of these audit programs, don't you think you will have to memorize? No, you can just think about it. One appointment, you can always think about it. Auditor's objectives, auditor's requirements, auditor will have to look at rules and regulations, auditor will have to look at control system of the organization, auditor will have to look at the performance, auditor will have to look at the efficiency, auditor will have to look at the propriety aspects. Yeah, so there are a lot of points. So every time you think of these points, just structure that, maybe a sentence around those points, and your solution is ready. So clear on this? Yeah. So some of these type of questions could be there in the exam. Yeah. Because you keep thinking, what type of questions could be there? So this could be one of the question. And you may be again thinking, sir, is it necessary to write down all of these points in the same manner it's written over here? Yes, of course, you can do that. But if you want to do that, you'll have to get into cramming. Okay, you'll have to memorize, which is not going to be easy. Remember, there are so many types of entities covered within this chapter. And for each and every type of entity, if you are to required to memorize, let's suppose 10 points. So you'll have to memorize at least 100 points in this chapter itself. So that's why what is the better approach? Better approach is to look into some of these points which you can apply for most of these types of entities. And you will get to see as we move further, you will see that some of these points are going to be repeated. I'm saying points are going to be repeated. Of course, using those points, you can structure your sentences. Clear? Everyone clear? Any questions on this? Tell me, any questions, any doubts if you have on this? Nitin is saying yes, clear. Yeah, so Nitin is, I think you're trying to say logic and conceptually, we should just try to look into these points. Yes, I would advise that part, huh? Because otherwise, if you start, getting into memorizing some of these points, or if you start cramming, okay, that is going to be very challenging, huh? And that's where you may think that this chapter is quite difficult or typical. Okay, clear? All right, so now moving further. Now we'll move on to another type of organization. Third type. Now, what is the third type of organization? NGO. Have you heard about NGO? Non-governmental organization. Have you heard about this? Tell me, have you heard about NGOs? Any understanding if you have about NGOs? Tell me quickly. Okay, great. So Srini says non-profit organization. Yes. Hardik says Section 8 company. So that's the structure you are saying. Now, in terms of NGO, whatever understanding that you have, please tell me. Huh? Kambeshwari says organizations who do not have the objective to earn profits. Nitin says the organizations which are not working for profit. Yes, there you are. Niru says like charitable one. Great. Ritika says the organizations which are working for society welfare. I think same is the response from Ratimalini. Very good. Yeah. Nancy is saying organizations which have got social objectives. Yes, that's what you'll see. Okay, Pranav says like organizations that provide relief funds. Sure. Hardik says like they have a form for objective specified and indulge in some charitable social objective. Yes. Ritika says promotion of art and culture. Yes, of course, there could be so many activities they may be involved into. Now, see, when it comes to some of these types of entities, the moment you say that you understand about that organization, yeah, I would say you don't need to do anything further in this chapter on that. Because every time, if you understand about that organization or maybe that industry, then in the previous so many chapters that you have covered, you would know what all audit procedures you will be required to apply on that. Or I believe you will definitely be able to think about audit procedures that you will be required to apply on that. The only place where you can get stuck, so let's suppose if there's a question in the exam that write down your audit program that you will follow for NGOs. Now, where will you get stuck? Can you tell me? So if you ask me, you'll get stuck if you don't know what an NGO is. Yes or no? You will get stuck if you don't know what an NGO is. But if you understand what an NGO is, what are the activities it is involved into, I'm sure you'll not get stuck on this question. Why? Because you can think so many pointers as around its audit. Yes or no? Tell me. Tell me. Is this correct or not? So is my understanding correct or not? Yes or no? Tell me. Nitin, Shrini, they are saying yes. Yeah. So that is where I was saying that now what you will get to see is we'll keep discussing different types of entities. And what was the context of this chapter? If you remember, what was the context which we were required to get into in this chapter? That was not to learn what is audit. No, that was only to understand something more about these types of entities in terms of the rules and regulations which are applicable to them, number one, and some of their special features. Why? Because the moment you understand these two things, you will start getting to know about that entity. And if you know about that entity, then your job is done. Why? Because you are, I think, trained enough to think about the audit procedures in respect of any entity there. Yes or no? Yeah. So with the same understanding or with the same thought process, I would say, please apply this approach in respect of each and every entity that we are going to pick up now. Yeah, because we have spent significant time in terms of our discussion on the government audit, wherein there were a lot of peculiarities we talked about. And then we continued on local bodies. So you would have seen that when we continued on local bodies, we found a lot of things were common and nothing new was required to be learned as such. Yes or no? Specifically. The only point which we wanted to maybe understand was what is a local body. So you understood, of course, yes, municipal corporation could be an example of local body. So now you'll know, okay, because municipal corporation, if you understand, then all the things which are attached as around the audit of local body, you will be able to handle. Yeah. So similarly, now what should you do? You should every time think about that organization and start thinking about their activities, and from the perspective of its accounts, that in terms of their accounts, what should they have? Should they have any receipts? If they are going to have the receipts, where are going to be those receipts coming from? What all types of expenditures those entities will be involved into, whether they will have any assets or liabilities, correct? And of course, what are going to be the legal structures of those entities? Maybe with the help of some examples, you can just think about it. Yeah. So let's just try to look at some examples. Now, NGO are the one which are for non-profit making purposes. Now, what could be their objectives? To impart education, to provide medical facility, to provide economic assistance to the poor. Okay, there are a lot of social causes for which these type of organizations may be working. You may call them as charitable organization, you may call them as hospital, old age home, research foundations. Yeah, some of the examples could be CRY, UNICEF. Yeah, all of these are what? They are examples of NGOs. Now, in terms of their legal structure, now this is something which is important for you to know. Now, generally, there are three structures you will find in respect of NGOs. A very common structure of an NGO is to register that organization under society or as a society. So you may have heard about a society. Yes or no? So what do you mean by society? Society means, let's suppose there's a society which is working for public welfare or some social causes. Means it is registered under Societies Registration Act. Okay, that's a very common and popular form of legal structure for NGO in India. Another one, which is again very popular, and common legal structure for an NGO happens to be that of a trust. You must have heard about it. Huh? So there is a trust. That trust is having a hospital. Okay, there is a school which is running under a trust. So what do you mean by this? So there is a legal structure of a trust, and that trust is registered under India Trust Act. So these are two very common and popular legal structures for NGOs in India. Then there is another one which is also a legal structure under which NGOs are registered. That third structure is not very common and popular. Of course, it is also there. Some of the NGOs are also registered under the Companies Act. And under the Companies Act, there is a form of registration which is called as a Section 8 company. Okay. Company registered under Section 8 of Companies Act. Yeah. So in India, these are the three forms. These are the three forms you will get to see. Okay. These are the three forms you will get to see in relation to a NGO. Okay. Clear on this? Everyone clear on this? Yeah. So when it comes to an NGO, so you'll see an NGO being registered under either of these forms. Okay. Now, as around the sources or application of funds. Now, as we discussed that every time there will be an organization now, what is going to be the first part? Their legal structure, rules and regulations applicable to them. Second will be where do they get the funds from? Where do they apply their funds? Okay. Now, in case of an NGO, what are going to be the sources of their funds? Now, please remember, an NGO is not involved in a business, so that's why they will not have any P&L. Okay, they will not have any P&L. What will they have? Income or expenditure account, or receipt and payment expenditure statement. Correct? Now, when it comes to the sources of funds, now what could be the sources? Donations or grants. This is a very common source, which are in the nature of promoters' contribution. Means, in case of a trust, the trustees, the money which they donate or they contribute. Yeah, which is also called as a contribution from the promoter. So what will you do with that? Those are recorded as capital receipt. Okay. Another one, okay, which is about voluntary contributions. Now, what do you do with the voluntary contributions? So these are the contributions. Contribution means these are the funds which are received with a specific direction that they shall form part of corpus of the trust or the NGO. Okay. Third is in the form of contribution of a grant towards a revolving fund. What does it mean? Means to rotate the amount by giving temporary loans from the fund to another NGO or to the beneficiaries for their projects. Okay. So a contribution, a fund will be received. What is going to be the objective of that? To give it as a loan, maybe to another NGO or to any other person who requires that. And then, of course, recover that loan. Yeah. Third, donation and grants which are received for acquisition of specific fixed assets. Okay. One, you receive a voluntary contribution, which is for a specific purpose, but specific purpose is that of an expenditure. But now in fourth point, the fund, whether it's in the form of a donation or grant that you receive, is for acquisition of asset, fixed asset. Okay. Fifth could be the contribution in kind. Means you are not receiving the monetary fund. You are receiving the funds in kind. Maybe you are receiving clothes. Yeah. So in winters, you get to see a lot of material is donated to NGOs. Yeah, clothes are donated. Okay, woolen clothes are donated. Blankets are donated. All of these are examples of what? Contributions in kind. Understood? Yeah. Now, what are the provisions related to audit? Now, that provision of audit will again be driven by the legal structure of the NGO. So, auditors of NGO which are registered under society or trust are normally appointed by whom? Management of the society or the trust, as the case may be. But if it's a Section 8 company, then please remember it's a company. Then who will appoint the auditor of Section 8 company? Who appoints the auditor in case of a company? Tell me. Who appoints the auditor in case of a company? Tell me quickly. So if it's a company, who appoints the auditor? Hardik says audit committee and board of directors. Great. But actually, who do you say is the person or is the one who eventually appoint the auditors? Tell me. It's the members of the company. Yes or no? Eventually, it's the members of the company. So that's why when it comes to a Section 8 company, because it's a company, so that's why auditors are appointed by members of the Section 8 company. Clear? Clear? Any questions so far? Tell me. Any questions? No? All right. Now, moving further. Now, we are going to talk about audit planning. Now, in this case, as you can see, there are a lot of points which are available in respect of audit plan. Now, one way is you just mug up all of these points. Other way is you think about an NGO and as an auditor, just try to apply your mind that what all things you will plan as an auditor. Okay. Now, some of these things could be very generic. So you'll think about the work means what is going to be the activity of the NGO. What is it that they are going to work upon? Means there are areas of operations, environment, all of these things you will consider as an auditor. You will think about the relevant statutes which are applicable to them. So that is going to be your part of audit planning, yes or no? Yeah. Reviewing the legal form of the organization, memorandum, articles, or any other rules or regulations which are applicable to them. So all of these things you are going to look at, correct? Yeah. Then, if there are any minutes of the board, managing committee, governing body, or any other committee, so all of those minutes you'll look at, study their accounting system, procedures, internal controls, internal checks, setting up materiality levels. Is it any different from something that you already understand? The answer is no. Nature and timing of report, of course, yes, this is going to be a part of your planning. Involvement of experts and their reports. Review the previous year's auditor's report. So tell me, is there anything new as far as planning of audit of NGO is concerned? Tell me quickly. Yeah, so here again, my thought process is very simple that when it comes to the planning of audit, what you should do is you should just go back to the audit planning that you may have covered in your first session. Okay, just apply the same procedure and basis that just try to memorize some of those points which you would have thought are the relevant in respect of audit planning and apply them over here. Okay, most of these points I'm sure you will be able to think through. Yeah, clear on this, everyone? Any questions, any doubts so far? Quickly, any questions, any doubts? Yeah. Ambeshwari says it's same. Yes, very good. Now, when it comes to the NGO, okay. Now, in case of an NGO, let's try to think about its financial statements. Okay, I'm calling this as financial statement because Tambeshwari is asking why the board will not see. Of course, the board will do that. It's not that board will not do that, but eventually, even in case of a company, who is the end authority who is approving that? Members. So that's why we are calling it as members. Huh? So if you want to write down that for a Section 8 company, it will be starting with the board of directors, which is then approved by the member. So the same procedure is going to be there. Okay, so don't get confused with that. The point is that eventually who is doing that? So in case of society and trust, it's the management. But in case of company, because it's the structure of a company under Companies Act, so that's why it's members. Understood? So that's the difference, Tameshwari. Right? Clear? Clear, Tameshwari? Clear on this? Great. Okay, now let's try to look at some of the items. Okay, Ritika has a question. Ritika is saying, sir, receipt and expenditure account, it will have right instead of P&L? Yes. In fact, you should say it's receipt and payment account more so. Okay, and that will again be dependent on the types of statements which such type of NGOs will be preparing. Okay, and some of these things you will get more clarity. Huh? Tambeshri is saying audit program is not omitted. So what do you mean by not omitted? I can't understand. Huh? What do you mean by this is not omitted? I can't understand. Uh, Maybe you can just elaborate. Huh? What do you mean by this? Okay, now, in case of an NGO, see at one place because you'll receive the fund. So all of those funds which you will collect. So that is required to be checked, verified. Yeah. So when it comes to the assets, liabilities, income, expenses of the NGO, what all areas you will have to look into? One, of course, is the fund. That is what you call as corpus fund, which is nothing but a capital in case of a company. Yeah. So in case of a company, what will you call it as capital? So in case of an NGO, you call it as corpus fund. Then of course, there are going to be various types of reserves. Yeah. Then some of the funds which are received when they are very specific means they can be used only for a specific purpose. So what do you call them as earmarked funds? So that is again going to be one of the areas for auditor to audit. Yeah. Then in respect of the project or agency balances, some of the balances could be there. Yeah. As per the agreement with the donors. Now, loans, if at all any loans are there. So, that is going to be one of the items. Fixed assets. NGOs will always have fixed assets. That is nothing but PP. Yeah. Investments. So, if the NGOs have got surplus funds, they can always make the investments. Yeah. Cash in hand. Now, cash, bank balances. Now, these are again going to be very, very common areas in case of NGO also. Similarly, depending on the types of activities into which those NGOs are involved, they may have inventory or the items of inventory for those purposes. Yeah. And again, depending on the types of activities into which NGO is involved, the types of projects into which it is involved, there can always be different types of expenses. Yeah, so that's why we are calling it as program and expenses related to the projects or the expenses related to various programs. Yeah, establishment expenses. Establishment expenses, you can say, are the ones which are in relation to employees. ESI, their administrative charges, okay, some of these expenses. Yeah. Similarly, if you look at the receipt side for the NGO, means the sources from which they receive funds. So the contributions and grants, we have already talked about it. They can also receive funds through the programs. So at times they will conduct programs from which they will receive funds. In some of the NGOs, there could be various members. So the members may be giving their fees on an annual basis, membership fees. Yeah. Some of the NGOs may involve some programs for which subscriptions are required. So NGOs may get some subscription income, or you can say subscription fees. Yeah. And if at all they are giving any loans or they are having investments, so they may earn interest or dividends. Okay. So now, in this case, what I've just tried to explain you is about the line items which could be there in the balance sheet or say in the income and expenditure of an NGO. Now, as an auditor, if you will audit the financial statements of an NGO, so what will you do? These are the line items you will come across. And don't you think you will be able to apply procedures on some of those line items? Tell me quickly. So is this anything new as far as some of the line items are concerned, as far as audit procedures are concerned? Tell me. So you think you will be able to think through some of the audit procedures around it? Yes or no? Tell me quickly. Yeah. Yeah. So that's the approach. Huh? There again. Huh? Now, please remember, the problem here again is going to be what? If you don't know about an NGO, you will not be able to think about what could be there in the balance sheet of an NGO, what could be there in the income and expenditure of NGO. Yeah. So that's why the starting point was what? To understand that entity. The moment you will understand about that entity, automatically some of these points will become clearer to you. And you will then be able to write down all of these points. And in the exam, some of the questions could be that what are going to be some of the line items on receipts and what could be your audit procedures on receipts of NGO? What could be your audit procedures on receipt of on expenditure of NGO? Okay, or some of the assets of NGO or some of the line items which could be there in the balance sheet of NGO. Yeah, understood. Yeah. So this is something which you need to now think about. So this is something over which you need to now develop your approach. Clear? Everyone clear on this? Okay. So I think with this, we can just conclude our discussion for today. And because I think it will not be appropriate to stretch your session today. Yeah, considering you may have some plans, but it's good to see everyone around. Huh? Okay, so I think Tambeshwari has a question. She's saying audit program on page 9.30. 9.30. Okay. So this is 9.30 while planning the audit program. So what's the question? Huh? So what's the question, Tambeshwari? So this audit program, are you talking about this? So what's the question? Okay, so while I'll look into the questions and doubts, if you have any, so I think with this, we can just conclude our discussion for today. Yeah. And thanks so much for your time, especially for today. Huh? It's good to see everyone around. Thanks so much for this wonderful participation as well. And Happy New Year to everyone. Enjoy your New Year. And of course, we are going to meet once again in the New Year. Yeah. But I'll just stick around. Huh? So if you want to just move, you can just feel free. But if you have any questions, doubt, you can just stay around. Huh? Okay. All right. So I think Tambeshwari, again, I'm not able to understand your question, Tameshwari, but if you are asking about the audit program, so the audit program was all about some of these line items that we discussed, which could be there in the balance sheet or in the income and expenditure. So every time when you'll think about the audit program, what will you do? You'll look into the financial statements. You will think about as to, what all things you'll do. Yeah. So that's the discussion, right? Malu is saying corpus contribution. So corpus contribution, you can say it's all about it's similar to the capital that you see in case of company. Yeah? So the corpus, the funds that you generate initially. Yeah? Okay. Ritika, I'll have to just check. Maybe I'll have to check and then maybe in the next session we can discuss. Tameshri is asking audit program is not omitted. I don't think that's omitted. So that's the program only. Yeah. Okay. Ritika, I'll have to check and then come back to you. Huh? Okay. All right. Any more questions? Okay. Shushini is asking about my plan. So plan is, yeah, na, so plan was to be here with all of you. And of course, it was great to be with everyone today. And now I'll also try to enjoy myself over this new year. All right. All right. Great. Thanks. So I think we can just close our discussion now. Yeah. Great. Thanks. And once again, Happy New Year. Enjoy your New Year Eve. Thanks so much. Okay. Anji. Yes.